Boom, and we're live again. Thanks so much for joining us all. Now, the task today. Hi to everybody. Thanks for joining us again on Tete-a-Tete to continue the conversation about what we've learned from the pandemic with my wonderful guests, Priscilla and Nwikpo, broadcast journalist, and Carol Mae Whittick, producer of HER Conversations and collaborator on the Great Awakening Project. So, Carol, Priscilla, welcome again.
Now, thank you, Ted. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good. So today in part 2, I'm going to focus on what we've taken away about society and what insights we're forming into how our future, that would be post-pandemic, is going to be. The first question I've got to ask is that about censorship. Have you been surprised by the levels of censorship that you've seen, Carol?
You know, when I was thinking about answering this question, I was thinking like yes and no. I mean, yes, because I've never lived through this level of censorship before. Like censorship on this blanket level has never in history, as far as I'm aware. I was like, we're in a different time, so we all have the ability to try and see something. Like I've been watching videos and they get pulled in the middle of the video on YouTube and things like that. But no, because in doing a lot of research, I realized what's on the other side of the wall of that censorship. And for that reason, because they've got such a strong and defined narrative here, and if I look at it, I just think that narrative is just such a thin band of information, and yet everyone's buying into it. And the truth on the other side is just multiple times and multiple streams. Bigger than that, but it would crush that narrative in a heartbeat, really. But and also when I was thinking about have I ever lived through censorship in my time, the only other time I could think of something that was censored, and I think it was actually used as a marketing ploy, was back in the 80s. You probably remember there was a band from the UK called Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Oh yes.
And they had this song called Relax. Remember? And it was, you know, it was like the most salacious, imagine, but it was like the most terrible and most salacious lyrics and so awful in his talking.
Relax, don't do it
Don't
when
do
you want
it.
to talk it to it, and all of that.
Yeah. And they were like, it's censored, it's terrible, we can't play it on radio, all the rest of it. But that incited a curiosity in people that then shot the thing to #1. And it could have been a marketing ploy. So it makes me wonder where that curiosity has gone with people, that if you either you don't know it's censored, but if I knew that someone was keeping something from me, that's the very thing that I want to go and see. So yes, I'm not surprised by the censorship, simply because I know there's a tsunami of information that would crush all of this.
Okay, so I mean, before I come to you, Priscilla, you said something about us receiving information down a very narrow stream, a very narrow band, but that actually the information has got multiple streams. Why do you think that people aren't looking at those multiple streams? Or are you suggesting that actually they must be? On the Frankie Goes to Hollywood, if it's hidden, it must be fun. Let's go and look for it.
I think in particular, if I think about the demographics that are really buying into this, it depends where people go to get their information from. So, you know, if you think of a kind of a demographic of maybe like 50s and above in a certain income bracket, they're unlikely to get their information or trust their information to just come from places online. They need, and they've grown up with the idea that news comes on the TV at prescribed times or on the radio at prescribed times, and it's preceded by certain music, people dressed in a certain way, the studio, the establishment and everything, and they tell you the truth. And anybody else who doesn't have a shiny, cool studio and presentation like that has got to be lying to you. It can't never be that. So people trust the presentation, and they don't think that any other information can come any other way.
Okay, so they've just been programmed into that. Priscilla, what have you felt about the whole thing with censorship?
I must confess, I've been so surprised at the level of censorship. And, you know, I think more than anything, it's I go back to a sentence that I made the last time, which was the very elect will be deceived. It's just the level of people that I see that are not willing to question anything. And as soon as they are being told, my experience has been a case of you have a highly decorated doctor, for instance, highly decorated professional who has been in the game for a very long time, and who understands how these things work, and you know, once upon a time was you know, revered and respected, and so on. And suddenly now their views and opinions have been discredited. Suddenly we go online now and we find that, oh, you know, he was found out for this, or he was this or that, or, you know, everything about them is suddenly no longer reflected as what it used to be. The level of negativity, there's an inclusion of negativity to their resume that, you know, you now look at it and you just think, and then, you know, you get people who immediately you say anything, instantly jump to that and say, well, he's been discredited, so we can't agree with
I think the word they use is debunked.
Debunked. Yes.
Yeah, but
There's also the debunked,
yeah. Right.
And you know, so it's almost like, okay, well, can you not see that there's a new entry here, and that this new entry is recent? Up until this point, he wasn't this bad person, but suddenly he has become. Should we not be questioning or asking, or should that not raise an eyebrow? But people are not interested. They're just straightforward. And you know, I always say that consistency breeds authenticity.
Yes.
And because people tune in, just like Carol has said, you know, they tune into newscasters. There's a reason why we have specific newscasters at certain times of the day. And they're there consistently, and they have teams accordingly, because people buy into them. People keep time with them. People assume them to be friends or associates, or, you know, and so they believe that the newsreader who doesn't know they're there will not do that to them, because they are friends with the newsreader. They are, you know, they keep time with the newsreader. So
it's a kind of hypnotic effect you're talking about. Over a period of time, people are programmed into accepting this kind of interplay between yourself and somebody you absolutely don't know, but you trust your life with.
Well, isn't it interesting? The newsreader is not there to answer questions.
Right.
You know, the newsreader is only there to read.
Right.
But we take what they say to be gospel, and we forget that whatever they're telling us is what they've been instructed to tell us. That is not necessarily, you know, what the truth may be or what the truth may not be.
Right.
But we don't question that.
Okay. Well, look, let's have a look at how some of these institutions work. I'm going to share my screen with you to explain that things are the way they are pretty much by design, because the media is a huge multinational business. But say, for example, in America, almost all the media that's significant is owned by 6 companies. Comcast is the biggest with 148 billion worth of value. Let's see if I can blow this up a little bit more. Can you still see that?
Yes, we can.
Then we have News Corp, which is a relative tiddler at 56 billion. Then you have Disney, 88.1 billion. Sony, 34.1 billion. They're the absolute baby of the lot. Time Warner, 60.6 billion. And National Amusements at 43 billion. Now, these aren't small concerns. And they have, of course, the power to really, really influence whatever it is that you're doing. And of course, they're involved in multimedia. They're involved in news, entertainment, games, and so on and so forth. So these people are really kind of woven into our lives. So once we get trapped in what they're saying, we really are trapped. There's one other thing that is useful for us to just kind of take a note of. Just a second. Let's see what we get with this. Okay. Just a second. I'm going to show you a piece about the media, which shows the amount that censorship influences the media. Okay, and where are we? Window. This one. I'm going to share. Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is one of the most, kind of trusted titles in the United Kingdom. This is actually the Guardian newspaper. Way back as far as the 24th of May, 2017. If you notice in the corner over here, it says Bill and Melinda Gates is the sponsor of their international development activities. So if one of the biggest players in medical policy globally, in the vaccine policy globally, is actually funding a newspaper, how can we possibly expect there to be truthfulness coming through? Does this worry you at all?
Oh, yeah, it's a huge cause for concern, because what it means is that, and it's not just the Guardian that he's sponsoring. He is said to have, his fingers in so many, including the BBC. It's alleged to be,
You're right.
He's alleged to be sponsoring, activities there as well. So, and that gives him a huge degree of influence. It means that he can have a narrative dictated and everybody will follow. What it also means when we have just 6 owners of the media, or, in the US like that, it also means that they can predetermine, which a lot of them do. We often think that what we're hearing from ITV is different to what we're hearing from the BBC. But if you take time and, if you want to do a little bit of research, you're going to need time to just watch a lot of TV, as it were. But what you're going to find is that even the sentences are the same, because they've all been
Phrasing.
organized. There's a narrative that is to be put out, and it's been agreed. The news source is not as it's not as distinctive. It doesn't come from separate.
Diverse. It's not diverse.
It's not diverse. Thank you. It's not as diverse as we want to think it is. So they may add a slight angle on a story, but that's just it. That story is intended to give us a certain narrative. There's an outcome that's predetermined of how we need to view that and how we should understand it. And I think for the vast majority of us that watch TV, we're not aware of that. And we just assume that, of course, this is what they said, and it's got to be the truth. Why would they want to lie to you? The other question is, why would they not?
Very, very well put. Carol?
Yeah, to tag on from how Priscilla finished, if the opportunity is there to do so, why not sway the narrative or the mindset of the mass to your pleasure and to your benefit? It's who can say that people who get into power and have that ability to do so wouldn't do that? Sure. And with the Bill and Melinda Gates being in control of so much, it's interesting because it's not just those. As I'm aware, they get involved in kind of like podcasting platforms like NPR and things like that would seem a little bit more independent and a little bit more free thinking. But if you then listen into them again, especially when the initial the vaccine and initial part of the whole pandemic came in, they were coming in and doing a very kind of swayed push on things. But like you say, with the language, they'll all say the same thing. And if you look, I'm sure if you look at Times and the Sun and the Sport and the Telegraph, they'll all say the same things. But, you know, one will use three syllable words and one will use punchy short words.
Multiple syllable words.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I mean, there's something else. Sorry, Carol. Sorry, please finish.
No, there wasn't anything really to finish there, Ted.
Yeah. Okay. There was something that I came across in research for this program, which surprised me a little bit. It turns out that the Associated Press actually had a sweetheart deal from Adolf Hitler back in the day to be given exclusive coverage of his activities. And I will post a link to that. This article was written by the Smithsonian Institute. So this is an institution of the United States itself. It's like the British Library, you know, putting out an article about British history. You would imagine that it chimed with the general narrative of the nation. But basically, Hitler was actually even selecting the pictures that AP put out in the run-up towards his takeover of Nazi Germany. So censorship is a huge issue, and people who talk about conspiracy theorists or people who are labeled as conspiracy theorists can very quickly be taken off the news agenda, and that surely must be a major worry for us all.
If you're concerned with truth, then yeah, it's going to be a concern. A concern to you. What surprises me with all of this, with all of these people that are so-called being debunked or having personal attacks on them and their careers completely trashed, and they've been doing these for 20, 30 years, and they've got multiple books that they've written, or they've people who to some extent also have lost their lives as well, you know, because of that, because it can get to that sense. I'm just surprised that people don't have any curiosity about that. It's like, why do they not want to know a little bit more? Why are you not curious that certain things are being hidden from you? Don't you take that as an insult? I mean, personally, if someone was hiding something from me, I would be insulted that they think that I'm not capable of looking at a few different pieces of information and trying to formulate some kind of truth or information from the middle of it and making my own mind up.
Okay. So, you know, I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Priscilla.
Sorry, Ted. I was just going to say, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Byline Investigates or Byline Times or Byline TV.
Yes.
Now, I think they did a program just last week on the back of the whole situation with Duchess of Sussex winning her appeal, and you know, the number 10 now having a conversation about changing the law. And you know, they did a program on Byline TV where they were just discussing just the the relationship between government and the press. And how the government and the press here in the United Kingdom are one and the same, quite literally. And, you know, the press relies on the government to make laws that will favor them. The government relies on the press to be able to cover their backs. And so they will write favorable stories and, you know, write the story so it doesn't make them look as bad. So when you think about, you know, that's the situation, it just shows you that really, you know, we as individuals must search for the information for ourselves, and we can't really be reliant on everything that we hear.
That is the point.
To be gospel, because, you know, as he puts it, I think it was Brian, I can't remember his surname, you know, as he put it, he said, listen, they all went to the same universities, you know, Oxbridge, they're all married to each other. They're all, you know, boyfriend and girlfriend of each other. They're family members. And so, you know, they're going to be working together to protect one another. So where does that leave you and I, who are not members of the club?
Okay, so we've talked about the situation on that side, on government side, on media side, and so on. What about the position on our side, the people's side? Have you been surprised by the levels of compliance that you're seeing, Carol?
Yeah.
Compliance with the narrative. Surprised that people don't actually speak up and say, no, this is absolute rubbish, or am I painting a false picture here?
No, I have been surprised, and I know I'm not the only one who have thought that within their circle there's so and so who they always thought was a worldly person, who was very intelligent. And that is a conversation that I've had numerous occasions, even with a friend of mine, with somebody who was out on every single protest, every single march, all of these things, like the council tax, the government, they were always
Iraq.
out there.
It would have to be Iraq as well.
Making noise about everything that they thought was wrong with the world. And they were the first person that were lining up for the job. They couldn't wait, and we're saying, but hang on, but can't you see that things aren't making sense? And they're like, what do you mean? Of course it's making sense. So somehow this mind control has really got in underneath the skin of people who said they were mavericks, who thought they were free thinkers, who thought they were bucking against the system. Absolutely not. Most people have just kind of really sat back, and I think there's a level of mind control, because if we also think about the television in itself and the way that it operates as an apparatus, it sets you into a state that puts you in a hypnotic state. So they can tell you any old stuff to go in there as well. So even people who thought they may not go along with it they've got them this kind of MK Ultra. You've got people where
What is MK Ultra for the non-conoscenti?
Is MK Ultra is a mind control technique that kind of uses torture and trauma in order to get people into a suggestible state, so you can split their personality off almost. So if you think what you've done to the majority of people across the world is you've got them in a massive fear state, you've threatened them with death, you keep showing them these images of these spinning balls with like spores coming off them that are going to be out and about wherever they go, and they believe it because they're out there. So they see this. So anybody who was all of the things, that radical person, suddenly you get them at their weakest point. And if you've got someone that believes that they are going to die because someone's not wearing a diaper, face diaper or whatever, then you've got them there. So the compliance comes from the fact that they've really managed to hypnotize people into compliance. But then also there's also a level of compliance that gets fed into the education system from day one anyway.
We're going to come to that.
You get rewarded for that. Yeah.
Sure. No, we're going to come to that in a minute. Actually, Priscilla, I met Carol at one of the demonstrations, one of the marches. It was the first question I asked her. Why do you think that some of us feel disquiet about what's going on and know that there are lots of questions to be answered, and other people don't get that at all? I'm going to pass that to you now. Priscilla, over to you. You tell me.
I can't really say why people choose. I believe they choose not to interact or engage with the information that's right in front of them, because it's so obvious. Interestingly, before we came on, I was having a conversation with a friend, and she mentioned a mutual friend, and this mutual friend was now saying, oh no, she's no longer going for the booster, she's had the first 2 shots and now she's starting to question things. And I thought, wow, well, look at that, you're questioning it now, not before you got to this point. But it's only just dawned on her that something is not quite right with this. But whatever.
Was she able to tell you the turning point, the straw that broke the camel's back?
Well, nothing's really changed, save for the fact that I think we've all sort of known that it was never going to end with 2 shots, and that it wasn't about the shots. It made, that was quite clear from the get-go, that I think
for some. I would say for you,
I think probably got us all, got us thinking, what's going on here?
Yes.
Because I think the government have been very consistent in their misinformation.
Mhm.
By, so for me, it was hearing the different, every day it's okay, so lockdown, we need lockdown, we need 3 weeks to flatten the curve,
Mhm.
you need to be in lockdown for that. Then lockdown is, we're in lockdown, and it's no, the only thing that's going to save us from this now is the vaccine.
Right.
And oh, you've taken the vaccine, but it wasn't the vaccine that made it go away, it was lockdown. Oh, now you need 2 shots in order for you to be truly vaccinated. At what point, where do you, it was very clear from the beginning for me to say, okay, the questions I was asking was, we're a nation that talks about 5 a day. We advertise on our TV the importance of 5 a day.
Mm.
Why are we talking about a killer disease, but we're not speaking about, what we can do to help ourselves
Our
for
natural immune
our
system. Yeah.
survival?
Mm.
We were not speaking about, what
Right.
we could do at home. We're being told that there's absolutely no cure whatsoever, but there's no conversation. There was no conversation to encourage us as the population to to give us any kind of support or anything that could where we could lean on. Everything was no, there's nothing you can do. Just stay in your home, queue in the cold for your food, wear a mask. And when you're walking down the street, keep away from everybody. And, I had people, I'll be going for my walk and I'll have people crossing the street because they couldn't walk past me.
But why didn't they put 1 and 1 together and make it 2?
Well, I think a lot of, at that time, at the very beginning,
Yes.
most of us sat there just consuming the news, didn't we? Just
Right.
consuming what was being said to us
Right.
constantly. And I think that, it takes a lot. I spoke of my experience where, it suddenly dawned on me to say, go and check the number of people that die in a day in the United Kingdom.
General
And
mortality,
it was,
overall mortality.
and it
Yeah.
was on checking that,
Mhm.
having, realized that, okay, it would normally be worse than this.
Right.
Right. So there's no need for the panic and no need for the fear.
Got it.
It was at that point that I began to do my own work.
Mm.
But so many others were not wondering about anything that they heard. They didn't think it would be anything but the truth.
Yeah. But I mean, this is where it goes back to what Carol was saying about MK Ultra. It's trauma-based conditioning, which is very, very, very profound. I mean, it puts a person in a state where their rational faculty is almost non-functioning. But I'm going to go to the next thing now, which is
Okay.
the fact that I, for one, know mostly educated people. If not formally educated, they're people of intelligence with some nous. They know how to go about their lives. They're either professionals or they're high achieving individuals. These people are no mugs. But their ability, people's ability for critical thinking, which is one of the main things that makes people fork out money, makes countries fork out money for their education of their citizens, is what has been spectacularly missing from the stage. So let's go to you, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we have the capacity for critical thinking?
Because you don't win, you don't get anything for being a critical thinker from day one. If you're asking a question about a piece of information that you get given, then you're a troublemaker. You're starting to be you're disruptive. When you're at school, that's what you get told that you are. And I was quietly suspicious. I kind of went along to get along at school, and I didn't really try very hard. And I did GCSEs, and then I didn't really go past A level or anything like that. I did it part-time, and then I came back to it, and then I just didn't go to university or any of those things. So all the things that I've learned in my life are things that I've been sought out and that I've been interested in learning. And that self-discovery has allowed me to bump into all sorts of things and swallow a lot of crap at the same time. And I think also when it comes to education, the education system, you don't want to be seen to fail or make mistakes. you always have to be hitting a certain grade. And there's a number of different things that you can do to make the grade. You can kind of know the information, truly understand it and know it, or you can just recite it and tick the right boxes at the right time and get the piece of paper and then continue on. And that's usually the quickest way, because as I see schools and as I've known a few teachers, their workload is such is that it's just, they just want to cart the batches of kids through year after year and
An exam
meet
factory.
targets. Yeah. So it's
They're
not
just
about
pushing through the production line.
yeah, it's not about fostering any minds. You don't have time for that when you're a teacher. You
Right.
don't want that curious kid in the corner who asks you to kind of explain exactly what you're saying about that thing,
Right.
or how is it possible that that happened.
Right.
That's not what you're led to be. And most people
Right.
realize very early on that you benefit greatly the more that you kind of just consume and just consume and regurgitate at the right time. And it will build your life up in a very nice way if you do it the right way.
Right. I like to come back to this at the end of the program, when we're talking about what we'd like to see post-pandemic, because I think I mentioned that I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and I told him that the shocker was that actually I was having to unlearn a lot of the stuff that I'd been taught about the history and the functioning of the world in which I lived. And this was stuff that I got a couple of degrees in, and so, I mean, what was the point? And this friend of mine is very successful. He turned around to me and said that, well, I really didn't bother that hard at school because he's incredibly, incredibly successful. So, it begs the question, that what is this rubbish that we're calling an education if it cannot make an individual discern right from wrong, truth from fiction, and value from anti-value? Priscilla, what is it about?
I don't think it's that bad, because I remember distinctly back in secondary school when my history teacher, she was teaching us about the national Northern Ireland situation, the whole IRA, how it came about, and so on. And I remember one particular class we were discussing if a photograph can lie. And she was explaining to us back then, not today, where technology is so much more
Advanced.
Yeah. She was explaining to us that indeed a photograph can lie, and that not everything we see is as it looks. Now that has stayed with me. And so, for that reason, whenever I see something, I don't always just instantly gravitate towards it, except if I have background knowledge, except if I'm aware that it is what it says on the tin, or, I've had any kind of experience of it. So, but I think the educational system it is not as bad as it is. It is not that it doesn't allow us to think, and it is not that it doesn't allow us to, just be out of the box somewhat. Those opportunities are there. How much of it do we take? And I think that,
yes, please continue.
I think it's where we fail, to extend or to recall some of the things that we're being shown or we're being taught, because within it, there are some truths.
Okay, you see, I'll tell you why this thing is a real bugbear for me, and perhaps you two can help me. Is that before Germany started to follow Hitler, most people don't realize that the Germans were the best educated people in Europe, more than Britain, more than France. This was a very educated people. Plus, they were coming from a civilization filled with philosophers and engineers and scientists and so on. So you'd have thought that these people knew better than to do that. They fell straight into that hole. Indeed, they are about to fall into that hole again, because I understand that lockdowns and so on are going to return in Germany. Same with Austria. So it strikes me that this means there's something wrong with an educational system that can't tell people, A, to know that this is right and this is wrong, and B, to have the spine to deliver on that. The spine, I mean, I'm talking about the courage. And Carol, please come in after this. But I know that in my country of origin, there is an inverse relationship between the number of PhDs the country produces and the development in the nation. An inverse relationship. So it seems as if education operates on this level, life operates on this level. They're like parallel lines, and the two will meet at infinity, which is never. Do you see? So this is my concern, that certainly post-pandemic, we're going to have to go back to some basic things. Like the Romans had this thing called the Trivium. Their basis of education was called the Trivium. It was spectacularly successful, where they talk about grammar, they talk about logic, and they talk about rhetoric. Where grammar is facts, logic is, processing the facts, and rhetoric is action based on the information that you've processed. And there's this old story Mark Passio told about Julius Caesar catching one of his centurions, explaining the Trivium to a slave. And he turned around to him and said that if I ever catch you explaining the basis of our education to a slave, I will personally kick you out amongst the Gauls and let them deal with you, because the only thing that keeps us above them is our system of education. Now, this is a worry. This is a worry. He knew perfectly well that the idea of knowledge, processing, and actual delivery were very important. But at the moment, I look at the moral, especially when it comes to making moral choices, the moral courage in our society is zero, non-existent. And I'm being severe, so please come back at me, both of you.
So I'll agree with you about the moral courage, because it seems people got so caught in their fear that they didn't even start to think about how other people were feeling and how other people were dealing with it. Like we
Right.
discussed before, Ted, that
Right.
for some people, lockdown was furlough. It was holiday for a couple of months. It was nice. But then for other people, they're trapped in a situation where they're in the house with their abuser, or they're not getting fed because they're not able to go to school. And for some reason, the people who are having a nice time of it don't even consider that might be going on. There's that lack of care. But also, I think
not only that, I mean, the fact, if I may please for a moment, Carol, the fact that you can't have a free lunch forever. That furlough that you thought was a freebie is going to have to be paid for by somebody, something, some authority, and it could be you.
Right.
It seemed to go straight over people's heads. And they really, really, really felt that, manna was falling from heaven and that there wouldn't be consequences. Of course, we know the consequences of that are going to be severe.
Yeah.
Please finish.
Where was I on the?
Broken your train of thought.
a little bit, but just about the morality of people and the care about people, because you were so caught in just what is it for me and not thinking about humanity. So when we started to think on broader terms, what is this going to mean for society and humanity? Most people couldn't see past that, and they couldn't care in that way. And then when it comes to just kind of thinking outside of the box that you get given or placed in with school, there's no reason to. You don't, if you follow a certain path, you can see that your life is mapped out. And even if you have ideas of difference, you kind of get kept in it by peers and family and society. You don't really step out because you don't get rewarded for it. So then why do you want to learn an extra layer of something? Why do you want to question something? For the most part, because it's uncomfortable to have a piece of information given to you and then suspend your belief around it, but just know it. And this is where people don't have that mental capacity, that mental strength, and also a lot of it, I feel, is ego as well. That ability to kind of start again, lose again, learn again. We always have to be winning, and there needs to be a fast track to success. It's we're not set up for people to kind of just dig around in the weeds and try and work around things, or we've become so attached to our ideals or our ideas that to have them challenged feels like a personal attack. So we're not able to discuss. Most people don't do discussion. They don't do philosophizing. They just kind of, this is what I believe. I read it here, and this person said it, and therefore that is the way it is.
I mean, further on this thing, Priscilla, is there an extent to which we've all been bribed into buying the narrative and not wanting to run, to break off from it or ask any embarrassing questions? Look, if I'm slipping you, kind of 50 quid notes into your handbag quietly, who's going to look a gift horse in the mouth? So is it that we have been bribed into accepting our status quo like animals in a zoo, because we don't have to, go and find our own food? It's all laid up for us. Is there any truth in that idea?
To an extent, yes. I think what it is, generally human behavior. We don't like to, as human beings, the vast majority of us do not actually like to not belong to a group or belong to whatever the narrative is, or belong to what the popular opinion is, of the day. Very few people want to have a different opinion and stand by it. They don't want to be seen to be, that person that's, as Carol said earlier, when you ask questions, you're disruptive. People don't really want you to do that. They want you to just agree with what they're all agreeing with.
Yes.
And I think you will find that is where, if you like, we seem to have been bribed as people. I think the other thing that we fail to understand, it's that every program we watch on TV, everything that we see has been designed with an intent with regards to its impact, the narrative, the outcomes. There is a desired outcome that is expected in the masses when they see it. And, and as such, nothing just sort of goes out like that without any real plan for it, except, of course, if you're watching channels that are not really taking these things into account. But it starts from there. So because the narrative is being prepared with an outcome, an expected outcome, and it has been fed, and you've got groups of people who are running with it and happy with it, it means that it doesn't take much for the others not to want to be seen to be disruptive, not to want to be seen to be asking questions, not to want to be seen as being rude, or, she always thinks she knows more than everybody else, because that's the accusation that comes. So you think you know better than everybody. Well, no, I'm just asking a question. I just want more understanding.
Okay, well, I mean, this is a good moment because I've always been curious about this thing they call predictive programming. I'm sharing the screen at the moment. That you talk about everything on the TV, in the media, on the internet is by design. It turns out that this is the New York Post, says that Simpsons predicted the coronavirus outbreak over 20 years ago. And it's not the only thing they've predicted. They've predicted many, many staggering things. But yeah, I picked this one because it's topical. Do you believe in predictive programming, Carol Mae?
From what I understand of the of consciousness and your mind, and how, because if we are out of the, to split the line down the middle, or the good and the evil, the ones that are able to create the reality. And if these things get slipped into our psyche without us realizing, if we're sitting there as well, your defenses are always going to be down when you're feeling that you're being entertained. So that's when they can really, like you say, Priscilla, push a narrative, because you're sitting there and you've got your soft drinks and your sugar and your fats and everything. So you're putting your body in a receptive state in order to take on anything. So whether they do it overtly or covertly, like behind the scenes, then I think it's possible that things do get dropped in. Maybe not so much as the coronavirus, but if you think of the way that certain films have kind of dropped in technologies that have then allowed things like the iPhones and all of these kind of microchips and everything's to turn up, and we just kind of go, oh well, that's fine. But if we think of the trajectory that they've been given to us, it's actually kind of gone a little bit quicker than if our conscious logical minds were looking at it, would ask more questions. We wouldn't be just so accepting of these things. So I believe, just understanding what I understand about the mind, that there is a great opportunity for anybody to want to be able to drop in suggestions into our mind, so that we're able to, so when it comes to us, we almost recognize it, even if we don't think we recognize it on a conscious level. There's a deeper level where we feel that we do recognize it. To use like a short example, I earlier in my life, I did a lot of music, and I was very much interested in songwriting, and in particular songwriting in the pop music form. It's 3-minute form of music. And one of the big production houses during the UK during the 80s was a group called Stock Aitken and Waterman. And they actually revealed their method of how they get people to know their songs, because at one time they had songs like every song in the top 10 was theirs. And the way that they said it is, if you listen to the introduction of their songs, there will be the melody line of the chorus playing. So that after you've heard the verse and 30 seconds later the chorus comes in, you're like, oh, I know this song. But you even if it's the first time that you hear it, because you get programmed to hear it already. So it wouldn't surprise me that there's levels of this, and there's so many examples of so many things that have happened. So many people who are in public office, so many massive events that have got, if we go back, we can see them all over films, all over music albums, or all over in stories, in stories going back to the beginning of the century, where things have been spoken about, even things like the Titanic. There's a level of predictive programming there.
Very interesting. Okay, look, I'm going to go now to the end. There's a final item that I'd like us to discuss very briefly. What are we going to do about the future? Now, I remember speaking with our other guest who couldn't join us last time or this time, Jojo Lemaire, who's a broadcaster in Ghana. And I asked Jojo what he thought would play out with this pandemic, and what he had to say he sent in a tape, which I'm going to see if I can play for you now. Just a moment. I'm going to cue him up in a second. Okay. And Windows. There we go. Share.
This whole notion that whatever is going on in the world can be curtailed through collective action. Personally, I believe it's not. It's not successful. It's not going to be successful, because whatever is going on in the world, it's going to happen. You get it. Where the world is being taken, it's being taken, and it's going to go there. So collective action and all that, it can have some effect, but in the long run, it is not going to be successful. It is individual paradigm shift. And I remember you've written a post on that on Facebook before. I don't recall exactly everything that you wrote, but it was quite a long post. And you emphasize on the fact that there's a need for a paradigm shift. And of course, in fact, you've been touching on that mostly in your posts, about getting in touch with your spirituality and awakening spiritually and all that, which I really, really appreciate. That is where the fight really is. If individuals don't wake up spiritually and understand their essence, all the marches, all the protests, all the that are going on, they won't do nothing, because we are dealing with an insidious force, an insidious ancient hatred that is still currently at play in the world. And the great books talk about it. Possibly when we have a one-on-one conversation, I would go into that.
Well, that was Jojo's take. He's saying that collective action to push back against the losses of human rights. You haven't heard the rest of the tape. Against the losses of human rights we're all experiencing as a result of the various waves of this pandemic. Collective action is important, but above all, he says that the linchpin of everything is the individual's transformation, even on a spiritual basis. What do you make? Unpack that for us. Who's next? Is it Priscilla?
I think,
Okay.
Priscilla. He's absolutely right in that regard. It's important for us to heighten our spiritual game, because this is not just a matter, it's not a physical issue. I don't see it as that. I think it's something that also requires, as I said previously, for our discernment to be up to scratch. For our game, we need to understand what is going on, and we need to understand to the point of knowing what to do at what time, because clearly what we're seeing at the moment is our governments are failing us. Our governments and our if you like, for those that we have entrusted our governments over the years to make decisions and to make choices in our interest that will benefit us. But I think we're starting to learn that that is not the case. We're starting to learn that it doesn't matter which government it is in whatever country, that our interest is not really what is at hand. And so that means that we then have to go back to ourselves as humanity, and come together in understanding, not just physically understanding what the situation is and needing to work together, and our understanding that we need to set aside whatever our differences are. It's not just a case of setting aside our differences, as we've always said, but being very, very serious and intentional about it. Especially now, because it's almost as if it is them against us. And if we are not working collectively, and if we're not spiritually endowed, and having the understanding and the support from above, as it were, we are really going to fail at this game. It makes no sense what we are seeing, and the only way we'll be able to make sense of it is within the spirit, I think.
Okay. Carl May, so one of the things that I always notice is that everybody wants to change, but nobody wants to change themselves. Everyone always wants to change in the environment, but they want to stay the same while the environment changes. And of course, it's a no-hoper. What do you make of Jojo's words?
I agree with his words. It's got to be an internal change, an internal connection, and then you fight or face this battle and this challenge that we have. You're able to face everything that comes at you because you've got some sort of spiritual connection. And the issue, and I think what is lacking in the vast majority of people, in particular the ones that are really buying into the stories, they don't have any connection. And that doesn't even mean that they go to church or not, because as we've said,
what do you mean they don't have any connection with what?
with something higher than themselves on a really real level for whatever that is. So it's not about going to church on Sunday and reading the Bible and banging the tambourine. It means nothing. It can be someone that just knows how to sit in quiet and in communion with whatever it is and allow themselves to really know who they are without any of the outside external forces or things that are swaying you in a certain way, telling you who you should be or what you should be. There was a quote that I came across yesterday as well that I posted on social media because it kind of tied in with what I'd heard from Jojo, and it's a Hopi Blue Star prophecy. And it said, many will appear to have lost their souls in these final days. So intense will the nature of the changes be that those who are weak in spiritual awareness will go insane, for we are nothing without spirit. And I think that just says it all, and it gives us an opportunity to realize that if you don't have some sort of practice or connection or desire to get to know who you are and why you're actually on the face of this planet, it just being in the question will start to bring you answers. It's when you close down and it's, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in anything, then you'll just put all your faith in presidents and prime ministers and royalty and the media, and they haven't got your best interests at heart. But it's the ones that are able to hold spirit and to understand who they are and are not fearful of, okay, if you feel that, you know, it's going to take me out some way or shape or form, I'm not afraid of death. I prefer not to die at any point in time soon because I've got things that I would like to do. But if that comes, then if my time comes, my time comes. And I think, unfortunately, most people don't have that understanding that when their time comes, and it's not the end. They don't believe that it's the end. So they think they'll be annihilated, which is why they're doing everything to stay here.
To cling on to it at any price and giving up all their liberties, even if they have to.
To stay alive. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I'm inclined to close it on those very wise words there, Carme. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Priscilla, before we say goodbye?
Oh no, I think I really love the quote that Carol shared. Without spirit, really, we're losing our souls, and we need to plug in. It's very important that we plug into the spirit at this time, in order for us to be able to not fall apart and not lose our souls and not get lost in the matrix, as it were.
Fantastic. Well, to all our friends, thank you very much for joining us and watching this program. All that remains is for me to thank Priscilla and Carol Mae for their fantastic insights and conversation tonight. And please join this channel for more output as we see it. This will go out on YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe, but above all, comment on what you see. Thanks so much for joining us. Good night, everyone. Night, night.
Thank you.